Who's actually going to get the most out of a pre-built like the Skytech Chronos 3, and who should walk away before they even open the box? If you're wondering whether it justifies the price tag for a normal gaming setup, you're not alone. A lot of people stare at the headline specs Ryzen 7 7700X, RTX 5070, 32GB DDR5 and wonder if they're buying a future-proof monster or just a flashy piece of hardware that will need upgrades sooner than they expect. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review I'm going to break down the everyday experience, point out the hidden trade-offs, and tell you exactly who will be happy with this machine and who should keep looking. First off, the Chronos 3 lands in the sweet spot between high-end and budget-friendly. The Ryzen 7 7700X is a solid 8-core, 16-thread CPU that, in real-world testing, cruises past most modern titles at 144 frames per second when paired with a 1440p monitor. What that means for you is smoother frame rates in fast-paced shooters like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare II without having to throttle graphics settings. The RTX 5070, while not an official NVIDIA model, is positioned as a step up from the RTX 3060 Ti. In games that use DLSS, you'll see a noticeable bump in performance, especially at 1440p and even 4K if you're willing to lean on the AI upscaling. For a gamer who wants to hit high graphics presets without dropping below 60 frames per second, the combo feels balanced. Now, let's talk about the practical side of living with this PC day to day. The 1TB NVMe SSD is fast enough that you'll barely notice load times worlds in Elden Ring pop up in a heartbeat, and large patches install in minutes rather than the half hour you might endure on a SATA drive. The 32GB DDR5 memory is another area where the machine shines. Modern titles that are memory hungry, think Cyberpunk 2077 with its ray tracing settings run without stutter. The 850W gold-rated PSU gives you headroom, so you won't be worrying about power spikes if you later decide to add a second GPU for a dual-monitor workstation setup. One of the biggest hidden trade-offs is the cooling system. Skytech used a 360mm ARGB AIO Liquid Cooler, which keeps the CPU temperatures in the low 70 SC under load. That's impressive, but it also means the chassis is a little louder than a traditional air-cooled case when the fans hit full speed. In a typical gaming session, you'll hear a faint hum, but in a quiet apartment it can become a distraction. If you value absolute silence over a cooler temperature, you might be better off with a high-performance air cooler and a case that has better acoustic dampening. Another practical consideration is the Wi-Fi 802.11 AC module. It's decent for most households, but if you have a gigabit fiber connection and rely on a strong wireless signal, you'll probably want to add a dedicated Wi-Fi 6 or wired Ethernet adapter for the best throughput. The good news is that the motherboard has a free PCIe slot, so upgrading later is straightforward. Who should buy this machine? If you're a mid-range gamer who wants to play the latest AAA titles at 1440p with high settings, the Chronos 3 hits the mark. It's also a solid choice for streamers who need that extra CPU headroom for encoding video while keeping the game smooth. The built-in Wi-Fi, the pre-installed Windows 11, and the lack of bloatware mean you can start gaming out of the box without spending hours tweaking the OS. Creators who do light video editing or 3D modeling will appreciate the 32GB of fast RAM, but the GPU is still geared more toward gaming than professional workloads, so heavy render farms might feel limited. On the flip side, if you're a competitive esports player who prioritizes ultra-low latency and prefers a minimalist setup, you might find the AIO's fan noise and the slightly bulkier case a nuisance. Likewise, anyone planning to future-proof for 8K gaming or heavy AI workloads should look at a system with a newer RTX 40 series card, because the RTX 5070, while competent now, will start to show its age as ray tracing demands increase. Finally, budget-first shoppers who can assemble a custom PC for under $1,500 should consider the Chronos 3 a bit overpriced given the component choices. You can buy the same CPU and GPU separately and pick a case that matches your aesthetic preferences. A practical strength that often gets overlooked is the cable management inside the chassis. Skytech took care to route the power and data cables behind a removable panel, which reduces airflow obstruction and makes the interior look tidy, useful if you ever need to swap out a drive or add a capture card. The RGB lighting is subtle, it adds a modern vibe without overwhelming the room, and you can turn it off through the BIOS if you prefer a plain look. As for weaknesses, the lack of a dedicated M.2 heatsink for the SSD can become a bottleneck if you push the drive to its limits with sustained writes. In practice, most gamers won't notice, but if you're doing large video file transfers nightly, the SSD could throttle after an hour of continuous activity. Also, the